everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'm Grumble, and we're back today with another entry in our Deathloop lore series. I wanted to delve deeper into the backstories of our esteemed visionaries, and so I just went and did. In this series, each week I'll give you the inside scoop on their characters, tidbits, and trivia you might have missed. Obviously, be aware that these videos are filled with spoilers for the game's critical path, as well as side quests. Let's go! This video is going to be all over none other than Frank SPICER, Blackreef's handsome radio host and resident music legend. For Frank SPICER, the loop is a void, filled with disappointed hopes. This is true for most of the visionaries, and for none more so than Colt, but it's Frank who puts that wistfulness into everything he does, and for whom the disappointment seems the most present throughout the game itself and its environmental storytelling. There's an element of nostalgia for a bygone era that comes with the kind of music Frank makes, and Frank himself is nostalgic for a great many things. His relationship with Colt, his own voice. There were things that he used to have in his old life. There were things he found on Blackreef even, and he's lost them to the loop. Just for scale, he went on an 80-day world tour right before going to Blackreef that utterly destroyed his voice. Even more than the fame, what fame there is really when living the same day over and over on a tiny island in the North Sea with only a bunch of egomaniacs and Eternalists for company, that was his motivation for joining the loop. He had hoped that reliving the same day would rejuvenate his voice. Frank does enjoy the broadcasts and acts as Blackreef's morning radio host. And sets off the fireworks that last all night, but there doesn't seem to be much adoration in it for him specifically. The floating messages that appear by Colt's beach hideout at the beginning of the game ask Colt, "Missed me?" and answer, "Missed you, babe." They show up right above the gun Colt keeps as a starting weapon, sure, but also right next to the radio and Frank's morning announcement. Frank and Colt's relationship is one of the most fleshed out in the game, with a lot of depth and sheer time devoted to it by way of Colt's messages, reminding himself of things he can't remember. Frank doesn't believe Juliana's warnings until Colt actually shows up with murderous intent, and he doesn't want the other visionaries to get out in front of the issue by hunting Colt down and killing him themselves, or capturing and torturing him the way Frank and Colt used to do with Eternalists who were, let's say, disturbing the peace. Colt's betrayal is a deep blow to Frank, a betrayal of his trust and his affection for a man with so many secrets. He defends Colt against attacks on his character in the lead-up to the loop starting, very likely without Colt even knowing, after Colt probably just shrugged it off or didn't know about it in the first place. For example, Frank threatens Charlie in a letter after he called Colt a, quote, walking, talking gun barrel, unquote, and questioned his seat at the table in the Eon program. Frank's unceremonious advice to Charlie, "So shove that shit before I shove it for you." Not only that, but Frank and Colt spent a lot of time together during the construction period. There's this in-game photo asset that shows him and Frank outside Dorsey Manor as it's being rebuilt. Colt, as security chief, had to be there. Frank, perhaps, didn't, but wanted to. There are also notes from Frank to Colt, by turns reassuring him or doing his best to make him feel welcome. Frank got Colt the apartment he barely lives in, but reminded him that he's always welcome at Frank's place on the rock, now that there's going to be no more fresh Eternalists arriving to go through the security checkpoint, and Colt has no official reason to spend the day there anymore. Before first day, Colt asked Fia to move his safe to his flat and Uptown, presumably to save himself the trip every day. Perhaps Frank anticipated this, and that's why he makes sure to tell Colt he's always welcome back at his club. If it feels or seems that this video is more about Colt than Frank, then that's because Frank spends a lot of his time writing, talking, and thinking about the man. He once told Harriet, very drunk, both of them, about how Colt fixed the fireworks for him, and there is so much wistfulness and longing there. And that's not even all. In the morning, every morning, Frank recites the lyrics of a song he can't bring himself to record live on air, and introduces the work with the words, "It's about a broken friendship, about a man I admired, I looked up to, and every now and again, I loved. Wow, what a disappointment. This one's for you, Colt." The song is in part melancholy, part raunchy, and that seems to sum up Frank's character and his behavior in Deathloop perfectly. I wonder whether Colt ever went back during any first day. Perhaps Frank recites those lyrics every morning, hoping that he will. Of course, when Colt comes by now, it's to put a bullet in Frank's head. If Frank calls the relationship a broken friendship on first day, then things must have gone sour even before the loop started. Another of Frank's songs goes, "We're born alone to die alone and nothing good can stay." He's a no-good crooner, a man with many escapades in his past and a colorful vocabulary. He's got a virulent temper too, that which landed him in jail, lest we forget, and boasts about killing a man for laying a hand on a member of his band. At the same time, Frank is fiercely protective of the ones he cares for and clearly gets deeply attached to people. Frank very clearly has lingering feelings for Colt and might even understand that Colt wanting to break the loop isn't even about him. Still, realizing Colt can't remember their relationship must hurt.
So if you ask me how I'm doing, here is my reply. I'm getting by. I'm getting by.
The loss of his voice makes him vulnerable. Ever since he stormed out of the daily setup recording session, much to the chagrin of his producer Rhonda, who catches the brunt of his anger for daring suggest he take 5. According to his doctor, Frank has the voice of an angel and the internal organs of a man twice his age. Frank doesn't understand at first that that's not a compliment. We don't have a definitive date of birth for Frank, but he tells Colt in a letter that his dad was in the same military conflict Colt was in and calls him a geriatric soup slurper. That means he's aware of Colt's Blackreef history and his nominal age. Frank says, "My pa fought in it too, you know. He says y'all ate your shoes." Frank also seems to be aware that Juliana is Colt's daughter, something the other visionaries probably don't know. Frank was recruited by Alexis himself. They'd first met at a topless pool party, because of course they did, and then when Frank's hearings were already underway, Alexis approached him with an offer. The exact timeline of this and his jail time is unclear, but it's buried deep in the lore that Frank faked a suicide attempt in order to get out of prison. In the Eon program, Frank, together with Harriet, recruited many of the Eternalists from prisons, both due to their familiarity with violence and because Eon needed one thing the most: cheap labor. Frank also identified people who might be susceptible to Harriet's particular brand of cultist bullshit and sent them on to her, funneling them into the Seekers, as finding God in prison is nothing new, but the Eternalist program isn't a rehabilitation program by any means, or anywhere except on paper. Prison directors and wardens were bribed. A lot of the money Alexis squeezed out of the backers went into Eternalist recruitment. The Eternalists were needed to build the structures on Blackreef that weren't already there, originally the fishing village and then Operation Horizon's infrastructure. By and large, the Eternalists didn't join out of conviction, but to have an escape. And some turned out disillusioned even before first day. But while it was apparently possible to be shipped home, even knowing about Blackreef, those who presumably threatened to blow the whistle were interrogated, read, tortured, and gassed by Colt and Frank. Before first day, their bodies were then sent out into the ice and dumped. Of course, that's impossible during first day because bodies simply loop, but there is one very irate man to be found in the boathouse where this took place, underneath Frank's mansion in Freestad, who wants to get revenge by way of gas poisoning. Frank's 60-second-minute answers are actually among the few to be wholly usable, which makes him stand out from the rest of the bunch by a wide margin. He took the question seriously, and he is one of the few whose answers Juliana barely edited. He is who he represents himself to be. In his business, that's an asset. Frank believes life is only worth living if you let yourself make mistakes. That includes experiencing regret, but the key is letting the past be the past. Frank reflects, but in a romantic way. He wants his music to elicit emotions in people, good and bad, looking for catharsis. He concedes he likes the spotlight, otherwise he wouldn't have chosen to be a career musician, but claims that it's not all that matters to him. It's telling that that last part of the line is omitted from the official version of the interview by Juliana, either because she doesn't believe him, or thinks the Eternalists won't, or simply because it doesn't fit into Eon's myth-making of its visionaries. Perhaps this is another in the long line of Frank's disappointments, being reduced to the spotlight-loving bad boy rock star. By this point in the loop, Frank is disillusioned and irritable, accusing the Eternalists at his club of freeloading, which is true, and not really giving a shit about his music, which is also true. He may not have been in it for the unending adoration, but certainly for an audience. But the Eternalists are more about the free booze than the music or Frank's stylings as an entertainer. Frank also recorded the jingle for the Eon Coil Center, which seems right up his alley, and it's down to it being Frank who has the most open and, dare I say, uncomplicated relationship with sex that it's not as sleazy as it could have been. Imagine had it been Alexis. Or Wenji.
I say coital. What do you think I mean? Coitus. Coitus. Tell you what I mean. You get your face in some lucky fucker's junk and say coital 5 times fast. Boom! Guaranteed. Head on down to the Eon Coil Center and see for yourself.
The Eon Coil Center, in case you'd blocked that part from your memories, is the local orgy center. It's located in Carl's Bay. All quote-unquote fraternization is forbidden except for the CC, probably to discourage strong emotional attachments between Eternalists that might bring the pot to boil. It is inaccessible except for the evening and occupied during the afternoon. And now, to continue the series of connecting visionaries to matching overseer strictures from the Dishonored universe, this: restrict the wanton flesh. Truly, there is no quicker means by which a life can be upheaved and sifted than by the depredations of uncontrolled desire. What avail is the concourse of a prostitute, the attention of a loose companion? Nothing. And what of the fruit of such unions? Only sorrow is born, only misery is multiplied. Within these things, the outsider dwells. Well, that's a lovely bit of slut-shaming. I mean, I'm not surprised that the overseers are anti-sex work, but, you know, holy shit. And that, my friends, is all about Frank. If you'll allow me a moment of shameless favoritism, aside from Juliana and Colt, he is my favorite. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and leave a comment on your way out. It's really much appreciated. If you want to support my channel, check out my Patreon at patreon.com/AnnaMarabella or my Ko-fi page at ko-fi.com/grumble. You can either donate or become a monthly subscriber, receiving access to my writing and videos before everyone else, including the inside track about what I'm working on and what's coming up next this month. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon so you don't miss what's next in this series. Also, check out my Deathloop videos, both live streams and Let's Play episodes, my recently completed Dishonored 2 Let's Play, and more lore videos. All of those playlists are on screen now. Thank you so much for watching, and have a fulfilling day.